Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Inshallah, in today's lecture, we are going to begin the section on statements and information. So, for us to understand the Sunnah, to understand the text of the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we need to understand how statements are put together and how the type of information that we gain from those statements. Are the statements questions? Are they declarative statements? Are they informative? Can the statement be true? Can it be false? Is the statement naturally true, or is it true by exterior information? Is it naturally false or false by exterior information? So on and so forth. The discussion goes. So a lot of the chapter or the book of the Sunnah in any Usul al Fiqh lecture will have a lot of this. We'll have a lot of the, just like in the beginning of Usul al Fiqh we had all these introductory sections. Same thing with the book of the Sunnah. You're going to have a lot of information about how to understand information and statements. So today we are going to talk about combined words and statements. We're going to talk about the nature of speech, speech of the tongue versus speech of the self. We're going to talk about the type of information that we get from what is spoken. We'll look at questions. We'll look at commands and prohibitions from the linguistic point of view, that is. We will look about statements that are possibly true or possibly false. And then we will look at warnings and declarations. And then moving from that, we will start to talk about what we understand from the statements. What kind of information that we get. Is the information establishing a relationship? Is it a statement that is naturally true or false? And then we will enter into issue number 1, which is to talk about statements of information are either found to be absolutely false naturally because there's a contradiction, or they will be found false by proof. So we will analyze those two. And then the last thing we will talk about is the causes of false narrations. And then that will get closer to the subject of the hadith. It sounds like it's a lot, but it's a natural. I was just kind of reading the points. It sounds like a lot of information, but inshallah it's not too much because it's a naturally flowing argument. We'll talk in the next clip about all of this, inshallah. All right, we begin the way we normally begin, which is to turn directly to the text. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. So Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. Al-Kalamu fil Akhbari, statements and information. You'll see why I translated as statements and information shortly. المركب إما مهمل وليس موضوعا وهو موجود في الأصح. Combined words and statements are either of no meaning and therefore do not constitute an issue to consider, and these type exist in the dominant opinion. So there are like made up words or that's not the made up words or words that don't have a lot of meanings or a lot of issues that ensue from those words. The example, of course, there's a difference of opinion. Al-Razi, Imam Al-Razi rahimahullah dissents, which and he's within our family of or our school of Usul al Fiqh. But the dominant position is that again, combined words and statements, one type is they have no meaning, and therefore they do not constitute an issue to consider, and those exist in language. The example that he gives is the word hadayan, which is like a word that means, oh, he's just saying nonsense, right? Hadayan. So he'll say that this is not a word that has of no meaning and therefore no issue. Well, there's a definition of it, but no meaning from the point of view of the type of analysis that we're going to have. And then he says, rahimahullah, أو مستعمل والمختار أنه موضوع. Or words and statements, or combined words and statements, are those that have meaning, and the chosen opinion is that these constitute issues to consider. And those are obviously the ones that we're going to end up talking about. الكلام اللساني لفظ تضمن إسنادا مفيدا مقصودا لذاته. Speech by the tongue, what we're doing now, are phrases which include a reference which yield meaning sought out for itself. So there are words that are coming out. Obviously, the sounds are produced by the body, but the words are coming out. In the words, there's a reference, an isnad. Yani the isnad is the way that the logicians understand the heart of language, that one thing references another. So there's an isnad. You know, isnad is, we say, chain of transmission, or sanada is like I'm leaning against something like this. I'm leaning my back against something. It is to reference one thing to another. So I translated it as reference, so you kind of understand the context of it. Maybe it's not the most elegant definition of the word, but I want you to understand the context. Is that where one thing references another. That's the heart of language. When you're listening to someone speak, what are you saying? When you say that, what are you saying? You are looking for the reference. You're saying this set of words to reference that set of words. So the language by the speech, speech by the tongue, are phrases which include a known reference, so that isnad is known, which yields meanings that are sought out for. So the sentence that I'm using now, I want you to understand the subject matter that we're talking about. So there's a meaning that I want you to get from the links, the referential links that I have. As opposed to that, we have something called al-kalam al-nafsani, which is usually a theological term that we refer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, وَالنَّفْسَانِيُّ مَعْنًا فِي النَّفْسِ يُعَبَّرُ عَنْهُ بِاللَّسَانِ وَالْأَصَحُ عِنْدَنَا أَنَّهُ مُشْتَرَكٌ وَالْأُصُولِيُّ إِنَّمَا يَتَكَلَّمُ فِيهِ. Speech of the self are meanings within the self, interpreted and articulated by the tongue. The most correct opinion with us, yani the Ash'ari school, is that speech is between these two kinds. And the Usulis are concerned with speech of the tongue. Okay, al-kalam al-nafsani is my internal dialogue that causes me to then articulate with my tongue. So everything that I'm talking to you about in these recordings is preceded by something that happens inside me. In the Arabs, they say al-lisan turjaman al-qalb, that the tongue is the interpreter of what's in the heart. So the idea is that there's something internally that moves, a meaning that moves you, and then it comes out through the tongue. Basically, he's saying, as great as that sounds, as usulis, we are concerned with what is spoken. Our job is not to look at the sara'ir. Our job is not to look at what's in the internal states. Internal states is something that we might talk about in tasawwuf, but at the end of the day, no one really knows anybody's true internal state. You can only really know what is articulated. Some of the mashayikh, they have firasa, they have an insight into their students, and they can kind of help bring out from what's in. But that's not the subject matter for us here, so we don't have to worry about that. So the most correct opinion with us, meaning Ahl Sunnah al Jama'ah, is that speech is between these two kinds, meaning that true speech is something of a balance between what stirs inside you and then sort of what comes out. And then the Usulis are concerned with speech of the tongue, because that's what's recorded and that's what we can measure and that's what we can build our arguments around. فإن أفاد بالوضع طلبا فطلب ذكر الماهية استفهام. Okay, so now what are the different kinds of the speech that comes out? If what is established from spoken words is an ask that seeks the essence, then we call that a question. So the question, or another way of just if we say a question, is that somebody asks you something, and the thing that I'm asking you is the essence of the question. What did you have for breakfast today? I'm looking for the heart of the actual thing that you consume. Maybe you had no breakfast. Maybe you had a little breakfast. Maybe you skipped breakfast. Maybe you had, I don't know, eggs for breakfast or toast or something like that. That's what I'm after. So we call that a question. So the question is the speech that comes out, spoken words. There's an ask, and I'm seeking the essence of that ask. وتحصيلها أو تحصيل الكف عنها أمر ونهي. If what is sought from the spoken words, if what is sought is the action or inaction of a thing, then we call this a command and a prohibition. So the first one is a question. We were asking for the mahiya. We're asking the mahiya that's the essence of something. Mahiya or mahuwa. It's a question. Mahiya is a Arabic construct of a philosophical terms that the mahiya of something is the essence of the thing. So when you ask somebody a question, you are looking for the essence of, if I said, what do you have for breakfast? And then you said, I didn't sleep well last night. That's not what I asked. Right? And many times we say that in our normal, I didn't ask that, especially when you talk to your children. They're talking about something else. So I asked about what you had for breakfast, meaning the actual food and substances that you consumed for breakfast, if you consume them at all. Maybe you're fasting today or something like that. But if a person asks in another thing, that's not what I asked you for. Okay, so that's the question. The command and the prohibition is that somebody is asking you to do this or not to do this. And we talked about this when we talked about the amr in the last module. وَلَوْ مِن مُلْتَمِسٍ وَسَائِلٍ. As far as the command and the prohibition are concerned, even if the one asking is of equal rank, iltimas, we said that multamis is somebody of equal rank, or if somebody that is lower than you. We said that when somebody lower asks, it's like dua. When somebody asks equal, it's iltimas. When somebody lower asks to higher, it's a question. When somebody equal asks, we say it's called iltimas. When the lower asks the higher, like we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a form of dua. That's sort of in the linguistic context. Here we're saying when it comes to commands to either do or not do, it can happen by, I could be sitting in my classroom and I can tell my classmate, please don't do that. So it's a command. We would call that a command or a prohibition, rather. Or hand me the pen. It's a command to hand, even though that we're equal, or one is lower than one is higher, like a child could ask the parent or something like that. We took that in the past, so we don't have to spend so much time in it. Okay, so I'm running out of time, so let me just wrap up quickly. We talked about questions, and then we've talked now about commands and prohibition, and then he has a couple other ones that he's going to give us that we'll pick up inshallah in the next clip. Okay, so we are talking about the type of statements and information. So we talked about questions and commands, and then he says, rahimahullah, وَإِلَّا فَمَا لَا يَحْتَمِلُ صِدْقًا وَكَذِبًا تَنْبِيهٌ وَإِنْشَاءٌ وَمُحْتَمِلُهُمَا خَبَرٌ. Otherwise, if it's not a command or prohibition or a question, otherwise, that which does not contain the possibility of being true or false, then it is a warning or a declaration. So, al-khabar, an informative sentence or informative statement, we say its definition is يحتمل الصدق والكذب. It's something that can be true or false. If I say Zayd is standing, either he's standing, it's true, or it's false. But what happens if the statement does not naturally contain the true or false thing? Then we say it is a warning or a declaration. So if I'm saying I'm hungry, we don't say that that's either true or false because it's a declaration. It's not something to investigate. If it is possible that it is true and false, then it is a statement of information. Okay, so now we have questions, commands and prohibitions, which is like kind of one thing, and then we have warnings and declarations, which is one thing, and then we have a fourth thing, we have a statement of information. It's very important because when we're looking at the text that we're going to analyze in the hadith, one of the first questions that you have to ask is, well, what kind of statement is it? Is the Prophet ﷺ informing us, or is the narrator informing us? Therefore, it could يحتمل الصدق والكذب, it's something that can be true or false, or is it a declaration, or is it a question, or is it information, or is it a command or a prohibition? What kind is it? Because based on what kind of statement it is, we will be able to naturally put our information down different types of categories to understand. وقد يقال الإنشاء ما يحصل به مدلوله في الخارج والخبر خلافه. One could say that a declaration is a statement whose reality is sought outside of itself, while the statement of information is the opposite. So in a declaration, like standing, I gave the example Zayd is standing, which is like a standard example that they give in these books. Zayd is standing, that's a declarative sentence. I was in the one room and I came into this room and I said Zayd is standing, meaning in the other room. So I'm declaring. So there's a reality that's sought outside of what I stated, which is in that other room there's a boy named Zayd or a man named Zayd who is standing. The statement of information is opposite. It's meant what is stated is what is meant. I lost my page, just one second. So, if I say Zayd is standing and I declare that, what we are indicating is the standing. Sorry, let me give that example again. Let me read that again. So I want my examples to be coherent. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. One can say that a declaration is a statement whose reality is sought outside of itself. For example, standing. So if I say stand or don't stand, it's a command, but it's also a declarative statement. What I am after is the quality of standing. The statement of information is the opposite. So in using that example, I would say Zayd is standing or Zayd stood. So it's something separate than it's the whole thing. It's not that one external piece. And then in that second example, it could be true or it could be false. ولا مخرج له عن الصدق والكذب لأنه إما مطابق للخارج أو لا فلا واسطة في الأصح. A statement of information must either be true or false, since it either conforms to what is outside or not, so there is no middle ground in the dominant opinion. So let me read these last two sentences together because they go to last two pieces of teaching from the text because they go together. One can say that a declaration is a statement whose reality is sought outside of itself, like the example of standing, while the statement of information is the opposite. A statement of information must either be true or false, since it either conforms to what is outside or not, so there is no middle ground in the dominant opinion. So if I say Zayd was standing, he's either standing or he's not. There's no halfway. وَمَدْلُولُ الْخَبَرِ ثُبُوتُ النِّسْبَةِ. This is again where the word the nisbah comes in. What is indicated by the statement of information is the establishment, not the ruling. وَمَدْلُولُ الْخَبَرِ ثُبُوتُ النِّسْبَةِ لَا الْحُكْمُ بِهَا. So in a statement of information, we are talking about the nisbah, the reference, the internal referencing of that statement. What references what? We are not making a ruling on that. So if I said, well, I think that makes sense. And then he says, rahimahullah, وَمَوْرُدُ الصِّدْقِ وَالْكَذِبِ النِّسْبَةُ الَّتِي تَضَمَّنُهَا فَقَط. What is indicated in the true false statement is the relationship established in the statement. كقيام زيد في قام زيد بن عمرو لا بنوته. So for example, in the statement, Zayd the son of Amr stood. One second. I wrote Omar in my text, but the example is Amr, just for the translation to be accurate. So if I said Zayd the son of Amr stood, what is sought after is the standing, not Zayd's relationship to his father. So again, He says, what is indicated in the true or false statement is the relationship established in the statement. So when I say Zayd the son of Umar stood, what is the relationship? What is the isnad? Is that we are referencing standing to Zayd. Zayd just happens to be described as the son of Amr. Or he could be Zayd the tall, or Zayd the short, or Zayd the blue, like in the famous line of the 10 categories of Aristotle, Zayd al-Tawil al-Azraq ibn Maliki. Zayd the tall blue man, the son of Malik. It's just a made up thing, to give you the different categories. So here, we're just describing Zayd as the son of Amr. So you know that it's Zayd the son of Amr, not Zayd the son of Mustafa, for example. But what is being referenced in the true false? Because it's either it's true or it's false, that he's standing or he's not standing. What's being referenced is the fact that Zayd stood, not that his relationship is the relationship to his father. So there's no true false in that aspect. فالشهادة بالتوكيل. Now this is a real life example which is important. فالشهادة بالتوكيل فلان ابن فلان فلانا شهادة بالتوكيل فقط والراجح بالنسب ضمنا وبالتوكيل أصلا. Therefore, the testimony or the power of attorney such that so and so, the son of so and so, gave power of attorney to so and so, is the power of attorney for that person to that person, not for that person's father to that person. So, in the last example, we said Zayd, the son of Amr, gave Mustafa a tawkil, he gave him a power of attorney. So, Mustafa's power of attorney is for Zayd, not for Zayd's father Amr. That's what he's saying. That's in the strongest opinion, is that the family relationship mentioned is simply part of the statement, but the power of attorney is the essential clause. So, and there's a difference of opinion, I think, between the Shafi'is and the Malikis on this, but let's just stick with the Shafi'i madhab for now. Why is this the case? Because we are saying is that we are looking for the isnad, we are looking for that relationship in the statement, and in this case the relationship is that me or Zayd gave Mustafa the tawkil. I'm just describing you that it's this Zayd the son of Amr, not Zayd the son of somebody else. Let me pick up the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, so let me back up to the last point just really quickly so we don't lose the thought process. So we're saying that if we have a true or false statement, meaning a statement that could be true or false, what we are looking after is the established relationship, the nisbah in the statement, not things that are extra to that. So if we said Zayd the son of Amr stood, the relationship there is that Zayd stood. We're just describing Zayd as the son of Amr. A real life example is if somebody gives testimony in court, I saw Zayd the son of Amr give power of attorney to Mustafa. Therefore, the power of attorney that Mustafa has is only for Zayd, not that Mustafa has power of attorney for Zayd and Zayd's father, whose name is Amr. So in that, we say, as Shafi'is, we say that the family relationship in that testimony, that I give testimony that Zayd the son of Amr gave power of attorney to Mustafa, we say that the family relationship mentioned in my testimony, Zayd the son of Amr, is simply part of the statement. But the power of attorney, the nisbah, what is referenced is that Zayd gave power of attorney to Mustafa, that's the essential clause. So therefore, if Mustafa were to act on behalf of Zayd's father, we would say that that's a false use of the power of attorney, because the reference is only from Mustafa to Zayd. I hope that's clear. I think it is, inshallah. Okay, now issue number 1, which is the last sort of bulk of things that we're going to talk about in today's lecture. He says, rahimahullah, الخبر إما مقطوع بكذبه قطعا كالمعلوم خلافه ضرورة. Statements of information are either found to be absolutely false naturally, such as statements whose opposites are impossible. The example that he gives are like two opposites are joined. So like this cannot be a rectangle and a circle at the same time. اجتماع النقيضين, we say in mantiq, in logic, that opposites cannot be combined in one thing. So this cannot be white and black at the same time. Like this is black, the phone that I use for my timer, this is black and this is white. You can't combine those two colors. This has to be black and this has to be white, or vice versa. Or this cannot be a rectangular and a circle, or a rectangular and a square at the same time. So that's something that is found to be false daruratan, naturally. Obviously you would say, intuitively you would say it's impossible that those two things. And then he says أو استدلالا اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد, or they can be found to be false by way of proof. Of course, I was fishing for this. He's going to say, like when the philosophers, meaning the peripatetic philosophers, I think we've talked about that. Peripatetic means those that walk. Al-masha'iyun, they say in Arabic, because it said that Aristotle used to have like a garden and he would walk with his students and they would like kind of converse while they were walking. So they were called the peripatetic philosophers. So peripatetic philosophy or philosophers in Islam are those Muslim philosophers that took from that tradition. So usually it's like Ibn Sina, Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi, Ibn Rushd. And there are some minor ones. Can't remember their names, but those are the major ones. There are Muslim philosophers like the theologians, like Al-Taftazani, Al-Adud al-Iji, and these type of people, Al-Baqillani, Al-Ash'ari, Maturidi. They're theologians, but they can also be considered philosophy from the point of view of some of the issues that they talked about were philosophical. In the literature of Islam, when he says كقول الفلاسفة, or قول الفلسفي, like the example he's going to give is when a philosopher says, what he means is the peripatetic philosophers, العالم القديم, that the world is eternal. Well, we disprove that through dalil. It's not intuitive, because a lot of people say that. The dalil is that the world changes, and that which changes can't be eternal. I mean, if there's like a life to something, if something grows and then decays, or something lives and then it dies, and there's a lifespan, well, how can that be eternal? Well, what's the sign that there's that lifespan? Well, it changes. If something changes, then or receives accidents, the accidents of colors and categories and those things, that means it's susceptible to change, and therefore it has a lifespan, even if it's a long lifespan, and therefore it can be eternal. So that's a dalil, that's istidlal, that's a proof of why this statement is false. Okay. وكل خبر أوهم باطلا ولا يقبل تأويلا فموضوع أو نقص منه ما يزيل الوهم. Okay, now why are some traditions false? Every statement of the Prophet ﷺ that indicates something false and cannot be found to have an allegorical meaning, or there is a missing piece from a narrator that takes away the negative meaning, is a lie. It's just a rule, okay? So there's two parts. The first part, anything that is attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, that indicates something false and cannot be found to have an allegorical meaning. So there are forged hadith. And there are things that are just, alhamdulillah, I don't have many of them memorized. I don't want to fill my mind with something that's false, but so I can't give you a quick example of that. But there are traditions in which the illogical nature of the tradition, there's no way to interpret it even allegorically. That must be false. And then you look in the books of the Mawdu'at collections, you find out, lo and behold, it was false. A more common example is that there's a missing piece from the narrator. If you can't find that missing piece, that would correct the meaning. So the example that he gives is this hadith that's narrated in Bukhari, that the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the companions one day after Salatul Isha. Was it after Salatul Isha? Yeah. And he said, in 100 years from now, nobody alive now will be alive. And in some of the narrations, nobody alive today, the word today is mentioned. So a person that heard that without that word would assume that the Prophet ﷺ is saying, in 100 years, no one will be alive, period. That's not what he said. He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, in 100 years from now, no one alive today will be alive. Meaning, talking about people's lifespan. Anybody born today, it's not going to last more than 100 years. That's what he's saying, alayhi salatu wasalam. So in some of the recensions of that hadith, or in some of the later narrations from the narrators, that word al-yawm is not there. So that's a missing piece. Now if you have that missing piece, you're gonna understand the rest of the statement. Okay, let me speed up a little bit because I don't want to lose the rest of the subject matter. وسبب وضع النسيان أو تنفير أو غلط أو غيرها أو في الأصح كخبر المدعي الرسالة بلا معجزة وتصديق الصادق وخبر نقب عنه ولم يوجد عند أهله وما نقل آحادا فيما تتوفر الدواعي على نقله. So this last section he says again what some of the causes. The cause of false narrations are forgetfulness of the narrator. So narrators forget, especially if they get old and their memory fades, or false statements made to dissuade believers. These are the forged hadith. Sometimes that people, I don't know why they did this, but they would forge hadith to encourage people to do pious works, which doesn't make sense. I think there's enough in the Quran and Sunnah for us to want to do pious works. Or errors, okay, that happens, human errors, or other than these two, so other types of those type of mistakes, or false by definition, such as someone who professes prophecy without miracles, because every claim of prophecy is backed up by miracles, in addition to that there's no prophecy after the prophecy of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or a previous prophet mentioning him. So previous prophets always mention that a prophet's coming later, meaning Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, plus every prophet is given a type of miracle or a set of miracles to help with their prophecy. So if someone claims prophecy now, well, where's the previous reference to you and where are your miracles? That's just by definition gone. Or a statement that has been researched in the books of hadith and its narrators cannot be found. There are many of these things just floating around that we've inherited those statements, but we can't really find proof of them. Or what has been narrated through a solitary transmission ahad, what could have been narrated diffusely. So like something very consequential, like a miracle, and only one person narrates it, but it's a miracle that should have happened in public. Or like the Prophet ﷺ told us who's going to be his Khalifa next, or something like that, which is massively consequential. But then, you'll find like a weak narration somewhere, or something like that, which is one of the problems between the Sunnis and the Shias. Well, we're going to say, well, that's problematic because that's something that everyone should know. It should be very clear because the Prophet ﷺ's job is to do tabligh of the Risala. Anyway, those are some of the reasons for the false narrations. We'll pick up the discussion in tomorrow's lecture. Allahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. All right, in today's lecture we were able to enter into the section on statements and information. So we're concerned here with looking at how sentences and how statements and the different type of statements that we have and the type of information that we get from them. Sometimes we have questions, sometimes we have commands and prohibitions, sometimes we have declarative statements, sometimes we have statements of information that can be true or false. So he's laying out for us the different types of statements that we have, because when we look at the Quran, when we look at the hadith, the Quran too, but here this is the chapter of hadith. When we look at the hadith, we're always going to ask ourselves, what kind of statement is this? What kind of statement are we getting? We looked at speech of the tongue and speech of the self, and in Usul al Fiqh we are concerned with speech of the tongue. We learned that when we ask a question, we're seeking out the essence of something. When we ask to do something or not do something, that's a command or prohibition. When we ask, even if it's from lower rank or the same rank, when we are saying something that could be true or false, then it is a warning or a declaration. If we're saying something that is neither true or false, it is a warning or a declaration. But if we are saying something that can be true or false, it's considered a statement of information, which is my translation for the word khabar. And then we said, when we speak, we are always looking for the reference, the relationship between the two, what is reference and what is related to two things. So we said the example, and we spent some time on this. Zayd, the son of Amr, stood. The relationship there is Zayd stood. Standing is reference to Zayd. Not that Zayd is the son of Amr, which is true, but in that statement, the way that it's constructed, we're not after that. So therefore, if I bore witness that Zayd, the son of Amr, gave a power of attorney to Mustafa, that means the power of attorney is only from Zayd to Mustafa, not from Zayd's father to Mustafa, and that can have consequences. And then we entered into issue 1, in which we are talking about some of the reasons why statements can be false. Either they're false naturally because there's an illogical premise, or it can be made false by proof. And then we started, unfortunately I did this very quickly, maybe in the next lecture I'll do it again as a review, but we talked about some of the reasons for false narrations. The narrator forgot, the narrator made a false statement to dissuade believers, a forged hadith, they made a mistake. Someone professes prophecy, but obviously they can't. The statement has been researched, we can't find it, or something that has been narrated through an ahad transmission, a solitary transmission, but in reality that should have been mutawatir, that's a sign that it is false. Those are the main topics that we talked about. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.